Take out the liver. Let's take out the stomach. You can see the pancreas, we can see the duodenum. Let's take out the large and small intestine. Now, let's take the small intestine off the large intestine. Okay. Quite a mess in there, right? That's quite a mess. But I do know a couple things. If I stick this in here really carefully, I can see where the duodenum right there. Here's the duodenum. That's the end of it. And see that brown stuff inside the duodenum? That's feces. It really is feces. It's scratch and sniff. Like those scratch and sniff books. You can. Okay, so it's not really scratch and sniff, all right? So there's the duodenum right there. If you line this up like this, you can see where it's going, right there. So this is the next part of the small intestine after the duodenum. So I know darn well that 432 is jejunum. How do I know 432 is jejunum? Because it's the immediate small intestine after the duodenum. And it goes duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Now you're going to say, okay, I trace that around. You're going to go, Kiggins, where does it become the ileum? I have no idea. But I do know one other thing. Here's where the ileum enters the large intestine. Here it is. That is where the ileum enters the large intestine. It's actually called the ileocecal junction. So I know that this is the ileum. I know for a fact that's the ileum, because that's where it enters the large intestine. So if I'm going to label these guys on you, I'm going to label it up here near 432, or label it down here near 434. Because 432 is jejunum and 434 is ileum. And I know that for a fact because one's so close to the duodenum and one is so close to the cecum. I don't know in here where it changes over. I have no idea. Questions?
Would you just say the number again?
Yeah, 432 and even 433, because 432 starts here, travel it up, 433. 432 and 433 are jejunum, and 434 is ileum. What's next? I don't have my papers. Okay, now, where my ileum enters the cecum right here, I have this valve. It's colored orange right there. It's called the ileocecal valve, where the ileum enters the cecum. The contents of the ileum enter the cecum. The ileum itself doesn't enter the cecum. So this ileocecal junction right here has a valve. We can open and close this valve. There's gastroenteric reflexes that open the valve, that make food move through your intestine. They're in my lecture if you read my lecture yet. So that's the ileocecal valve. It's number 438. Ileocecal valve is 438. This first, are we on the large intestine yet?
Mm-hmm.
This first part of the large intestine is called the cecum. Hanging off the cecum down here is the vermiform appendix, or just appendix. Some people just call it the appendix. Some people say vermiform appendix, worm-like appendix. All right, so that's the appendix. Taenia coli. This is really cool. There are 4 tunics to the digestive tract. There's the serosa, there's the muscularis externa, which has 2 muscle layers. There's the submucosa and mucosa, right? Well, the muscularis externa is 2 muscle layers, the circular layer and the longitudinal layer. Except for in the stomach, there's an oblique layer. But the longitudinal muscle layer in my large intestine doesn't completely surround the large intestine. It's this band of muscles. This white band of muscles on my large intestine. That's the Taenia coli, that white band of muscles. On the rest of your gastrointestinal tract, those longitudinal muscles are completely wrapped around your intestines. But in your large intestine, these longitudinal muscles aren't completely wrapped around. They're finite in their width. Because where they contract, they make a puckering of the large intestine because they're not completely around it. These puckered parts of the large intestine are called haustra. H-U-S-T-R-A. Is that on your list?
No.
Oh, so you don't need to know that. It's in my lecture, though. Now you know. Now you can see the haustra. The haustra are formed because of the Taenia coli contracting. Okay, I have 4 parts of my colon, really. I have this ascending colon, comes up. I have my transverse colon, goes across. I have my descending colon goes down. I have my sigmoid colon right here. This is my sigmoid colon. And then I have my rectum and my anus. The sigmoid colon, they say this is S-shaped. This doesn't look S-shaped to me. This right here. I mean, yeah, a little.
Some angles you probably get.
Maybe a little bit. I say that in my lecture. I trace it out in my lecture. I go, how do you get an S out of that? But a lot of literature says the sigmoid colon is S-shaped. It's this curlicue little part of the colon. And then I have my rectum and my anus.
Are the flexures where it bends?
Yeah. Now, let's put this back on there and talk about the flexures. I have my ascending colon coming up, and I flex right there. It flexes from my ascending to my transverse. That's called the right colic flexure because it's on the right-hand side. It's also called the hepatic flexure because the liver is right there. See, that's also called the hepatic flexure because it's near the liver. Then I have my transverse colon coming over, and I have my left colic flexure. That's also called the splenic flexure because here's the spleen. So you can call the right colic flexure the hepatic flexure, and you can call the left colic flexure the splenic flexure. And then I go down, and right here, actually it's here, it's up in here, I have my sigmoid flexure. Here's my sigmoid flexure right here. That's my sigmoid flexure. Should be a number there. Kinda. Let me give you the numbers for these flexures. Right colic 441, left colic 443, sigmoid 445. I don't like where they put it, but that's all right. It's not completely inaccurate. So. Questions about those flexures?